On Sunday, hundreds of shops shut down in Baghdad, and merchants took to the streets in protest. Shops also shut down in Mosul. What's going on? Welcome to your latest Iraq briefing, where we cover the top stories shaping Iraq today. I'm Erik Gustafson.
And I'm Omar Al-Nidawi.
Baghdad faces backlash over new tariffs. So today we're discussing why hundreds of merchants in Baghdad recently shut down their shops and took to the streets in protest, and what it says about Iraq's growing economic and governance challenges. So to kick things off, Omar, why don't you give us the big picture? What's the fiscal crisis that Iraq is facing right now?
Iraq has been struggling to make ends meet for quite some time. The government is highly dependent on oil revenue. More than 90% of the budget of the revenue that the Treasury receives comes from oil exports. Oil exports have increased slightly over the last couple of years, but prices have actually been going down. If you look at oil prices 2 years ago and compared to today, they lost about 25% of their value. So that is creating a growing imbalance between receivables and payables for Baghdad. So the government has been belatedly trying to make up the difference, trying to generate more revenue, trying to diversify sources of revenue, and to plug this gap and reduce debt and budget deficits. And the latest weapon that they are using or tool that they're using has been tariffs. And that's got a lot of people, especially in the traders and shop owners and people working in the customs clearance business, quite upset because it really impacts their business.
So, as you just said, Omar, the government's solution to this fiscal crisis has been new tariffs effective January 1st. I guess some of these tariffs are as high as 30%, possibly more. And they have this system, which the acronym is ASICUDA. ASICUDA stands for Automated System for Customs Data that has gone into effect. So, what is the government hoping to achieve with these new tariffs and the Asakura system? And what are the intended economic benefits?
Well, I think you can group things into three key goals, I think, three key objectives here. The primary one is to realize more customs revenue. Figures I've seen recently is that Iraq imports about $70 billion of goods each year. Iraq imports about $12 billion of goods from Iran alone. So even if you applied a flat rate of 10%, say, customs on goods, you'd be expecting your revenue to be about $7 billion a year. But Iraq barely gets about a fifth of that. So there is a lot of lost revenue that the government could realize if the operations at border crossings and ports were effective and seamless. And that had been a problem in the past because Iraq used to rely on paper operations and that are prone to manipulation, corruption, fraud, and evasion. So the adoption of the Secuda system is primarily about making sure that the goods that are imported are accounted for. So that is one part. The other part is, of course, it relates to taxes. And part of the functionality of the Escuda system, as I understand, is that it allows the government to withhold in advance the estimated taxes on the goods that are being imported to be reconciled towards the end of the fiscal year. So this allows government also to have more control over tax revenue and tax collection, and reduces the chance that a merchant, a trader, an importer would find loopholes to claim that they didn't generate any business or to underreport the volume of their business. The third part, I think, which is quite important in Iraq, relates also to the flow of foreign currency and the flow of U.S. dollars from the central bank to the business community. So in Iraq, it's a I wouldn't say a unique, but it's a special situation where there's a state determined official exchange rate. So if you go to the central bank, you can buy the US dollar for 1,300 Iraqi dinars. So if you are trying to import goods, you go to the bank and you say, "This is the amount of goods that I want to import. Can you help me exchange this amount of dinars for dollars so that I can buy these goods and bring them into the market?" The problem is there is the actual market outside, the parallel market, so to speak, often operates at a higher rate. So you can take that dollar that you bought at 1,300 dinars and sell it in the open market for 1,500 dinars now. Now, what the Asakura system does is that it ensures that what people say they are importing is actually what they're importing. What used to happen, and the problem that the Iraqi government has been trying to resolve, is that people will claim that they're going to buy stuff. They get the dollars, and then they find a way to fool the system and divert the dollars elsewhere, including potentially to neighboring countries that are in dire need of US dollars, if you know what I mean. So that gets into the gray areas of the economy, and even into money laundering. So those are three parts that the security system is meant to address: money laundering and misuse of foreign currency, more efficient tax collection, and realizing the full amount of customer revenue that's possible. And combine that with more structured tariff system where you're increasing actually the amount of tariffs, that could potentially lead to higher government revenue. But of course, it also means higher prices for people and more costs for shop owners and importers.
Right. So we're talking about lost government revenue. We're talking about money laundering, like addressing this issue, the issue of money laundering, all of which makes sense in terms of the government. But walk us through now what happened on Sunday, the protest, the strike, and the actual impact on traders. How much have costs gone up for traders, and how is that impacting, ordinary Iraqis?
Yeah, so the situation has been brewing for at least 6 weeks. If you go back to reporting in early January, actually, that's when the tariff schedule came into effect. We were seeing reports from the borders with Jordan that the movement of trucks, the movement of goods, come to a halt because people are not sure how much they're going to have to pay on the goods that they're importing. And there have been threats by the trade associations and merchants that they're going to protest, that they're going to go on strike for several weeks now. And it just all of that culminated last week with the with what we saw in Baghdad and several other provinces. I think a big complaint among these people is that they were enjoying rather artificial, I think, low costs of business. An importer in the past used to pay, in many cases, a flat rate on the volume of goods that they're importing, not the type of goods that they're importing. So if you're bringing a shipping container, a 20-meter shipping container or a 20-foot shipping container, you pay a flat rate regardless of what's exactly inside,
Oh,
which of
wow.
course creates a distorted economic picture. And that's why
Mhm.
people are getting a lot of sticker shock right now, because suddenly they see things going up by 5 times, 6 times, 10 times what they were used to pay, and that's creating a lot of disruption for their operations. And I read reports that there are up to 100,000 shipping containers right now stuck in Qasr. That's the main port in Basra, because the importers don't want to pay all of those tariffs on them. So that's the situation that's happening right now in Iraq.
I mean that I can imagine that creates all kinds of complications because then there's probably more required payments for the shippers because they've been holding this out at sea and they're not able to continue their business. So yeah, it's all kinds of problems with that. So are the complaints justified, or is this just pushback from traders who lost these loopholes in the you know under the new system?
Well, I mean, who likes to who wants to pay more taxes or more tariffs or more customs?
Hmm.
Everyone wants stuff to be cheap, right?
Yeah.
So I think the sharp increase in cost definitely is concerning for a lot of people, and the increase in prices is definitely going to be it's going to cause pain for a lot of people. A government needs to strike a balance between acceptable levels of discomfort and inconvenience that come with the, let's call them the growth pains of economic reforms, which are often not popular policies, and the amount of benefit that you expect for the economy. So right now, a lot of people are saying, well, let's put these new tariffs on hold for 90 days, reconsider the rates, think about bringing them down from 30% down to 5% or something, exempt additional classes of goods. So there are a lot of demands that are aimed at mitigating kind of like that shock that just took place. But at the end of the day, Iraq has to take some moves, some decisions, some unpopular decisions eventually to remedy the situation, to mitigate or reduce this overwhelming reliance on oil revenue. And I think it's a move that's overdue. It's just I think it's the scale and the suddenness of it is just creating all these jitters in the market.
Yeah, it sounds like something that should have been phased in over time and not all at once. There is a bit of a wild card, right, in terms of the Kurdistan region. Traders are threatening to route their imports through the Kurdistan region instead of through, the port in Qasr. What's happening there?
Yeah, so this is a perennial issue. This is actually a long-standing dispute between the federal government and the authorities in the Kurdistan region, both in Erbil and Soleimani, and control over these border crossings and who collects customs and how much customs to be collected and who enforces the procedures and whose procedures work. It's about control and governance and power, and has been one of the stubborn, I think, disputes between the two sides. So far, the Escuda system is not effective at the border crossings of the Kurdistan region. So, as an interim measure, the Iraqi government, the federal government, is negotiating with the KRG, but also put in place kind of intermediary customs points basically checkpoints on the roads linking the Kurdistan region to federally controlled Iraq, to make sure that goods that are coming from the Kurdistan region are being taxed properly, are being, that the customs duties for them are being paid properly in accordance with the Iraqi government's regulations, that the government gets its cut. But I think it's going to take a lot of time, perhaps, for the Iraqi government, the federal government, and the authorities in the Kurdistan region to find a workable arrangement for the border crossings in the Kurdistan region, because it's not just about revenue and regulations, but it's also about control and autonomy and who really controls and sovereignty in your territory. So it's a complicated picture.
So the court, it was the Supreme Court, right? Iraq's Supreme Court ruled on Wednesday. What happened with that ruling? And did the government offer any concessions? And overall, kind of where are things standing now?
Yeah, the federal Supreme Court basically defended the Iraqi government's policy that this is legitimate, this is constitutional, there's nothing illegal about the measures that have been taken with regards to tariffs. The Iraqi government came up with a suggestion last week to basically discount the value of the imported goods within the calculations of the Escuda system by 25% to reduce the burden on importers. But so far, this concession doesn't seem to have made its impact on the striking tradesmen and the importers, who don't think that that's enough.
So the government has a fiscal crisis to fix, as well as, of course, the need to diversify the revenue that that the government needs to be able to operate with. But it sounds like clearly the solution is landing hard on these traders, merchants, and in a sense, because it will eventually fall on the people themselves, right? Because tariffs, all of those costs are just passed on to the consumer.
Yes, yes. I mean that is a fact, but it could also mean that additional government revenue diversifying the economy could lead to, if used well, could lead to better services, better social security networks, social safety networks, and better delivery of infrastructure and things like that. So there again, it's a balance. It's a tough balance to strike, but that's the price of unpopular reforms.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and then diversification will create more jobs. That's so essential for Iraq, right? Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Omar. That's a great breakdown of this latest development. You can see a lot more at our website, enablingpeace.org. If you're not already a subscriber, I highly recommend subscribing to our weekly reports, Isham, and you can subscribe right to our website. And also, a quick shout out our recent report that came out last year on Iraq's wastewater crisis. It is now available in Arabic, along with some important policy recommendations. So check that out. Thank you so much for joining us today. Until next time, masalama.
Assalamu.